Welcome to the State of Culture online launch, an event that has been eagerly awaited by many of us, not the least by us within the Culture Action Europe team and the Culture Action Europe board. It's fantastic to see in how great numbers you've been turning out for this webinar. We've been starting a tiny little bit later because we had problems with the live stream. That is to say, there are probably more people that are watching than us in the webinar as we live stream it and record it. And if you want to watch it back, or you have colleagues that have missed the opportunity and would like to watch it, we will make it available shortly after this launch online. We've got roughly an hour to talk about the state of culture. And in order for you not to be completely distracted by the rabbit hole of the State of Culture report and disappear into reading, we will make sure that you have the full report available immediately after this hour. Those of you who have registered, who are in the webinar, will receive the report in your mailbox, and everyone can download it from the Culture Action Europe website from the page on which you have also registered for this webinar. We've got a little less than an hour, which is fine. We've got enough time for what we plan to do. After my little introduction, I will pass the word to Elena Polivtseva, the author of the report, and I'll say a little bit more about the wonderful collaboration that we had in a minute. Then Natalie Georgadze takes over, the General Director of Culture Action Europe, to take us a little bit through the next steps, because we very much see this report as a starting point. It's not a final report of a project that we close. It is, of course, an intense research phase that we close, but for us, it is an opening to a conversation that is coming, and Natalie will take you through that. We intended to have a little conversation through the chat, so you can post questions and remarks in the chat. That we wanted Ines Camara Betancourt, our president, to moderate, but we just got messages that her plane in which she traveled to Zurich today was delayed and that she's probably not online in time, which means that we will just moderate this conversation ourselves unless she pops in time. So why did we commission this report at all? I mean, what an endeavor to make up the state of culture in Europe. And I still remember the first conversations that Elena and myself had, where we think, okay, is that insane? Is that a sort of a suicide mission to embark on? What are we going to do here? But really, the reason why internally, I also remember, Natalie, when we said, well, can we, where can we put it? How can we finance it? How can we put that in our intense schedule? But the reason why we, in the end, all full-heartedly say, yes, we want this report, is because we just came out of a really fantastic exercise with all our membership to redefine a new strategy for the next years. Our members will remember that 2023, until actually this summer in Malmö, when we endorsed and published our new institutional strategy, we've had this fantastic bottom-up process where we started a conversation in the board, had a very broad discussion with our members in LFCNA during the BTO in 2023, back to webinars, back to the board, and finally came up with this new strategy that has 3 strategic lines: sustainability, the cultural ecosystem, and cultural democracy and leadership. And these strategic lines we've underpinned with 2 principles: the principle of care, which we elaborated in 2023 on the basis of the ethics of care, where we actually always ask how we relate on top of the question of what is just. So this relational basis is really important for us. And the other principle is beyond, that you all very much know. Our conferences in the past were called Beyond the Obvious, and that principle of thinking beyond the strategic focus into a further away future, that we want to reimagine with the creative knowledge and expertise that we've got in our network. Well, with this care and beyond principle in mind, looking at cultural democracy and leadership kind of tells us a lot of our ambition, but very little yet about how we get there and what our point of departure is in a way. And that State of Culture report for us was an opportunity to kind of discover the terrain we are on, and maybe not so much the path, the exact path to get where we want to get, but a point of departure on which we can see, there is Ines, just in time, where we can see where we stand, how we see each ourselves, what is our self-image of our sectors, and how do others see us? How do policymakers see us? And the other more fundamental reason, apart from from our new strategic plan, again, hi Ines, just in time. The other very fundamental reason is, of course, our very raison d'être of Culture Action Europe as a network, just like many other networks in our membership and beyond, is that that advocacy role. It's the backbone of our activities. We are an advocacy organization, and in that advocacy, in that constant conversation with stakeholders and policymakers, we experience how we constantly need to justify our existence, that we need more support, more and better regulations, more structure, better structures, and that we have a potential, that we feel we have a potential that is largely underused in the big societal developments that are at hand. And we are in that advocacy conversation, we are constantly kind of explaining ourselves. What is our potential? And then we get into very nitty-gritty aspects, although there is a very big sign that what Brian Eno, to paraphrase Brian Eno and not go into the UNESCO definition of culture, what culture is. Brian Eno says, in a world that is developing so fast and yet is fragmenting so quickly, culture is this fantastic conversation. And I like that idea of that fantastic conversation that keeps societies together and is crucial for our collective future. So if this is something we can all agree on, apart from the more formal definitions of culture, then that is such a vast and all-encompassing concept, and so fundamental for everyone's life that it's really, to use the famous word of Kamala Harris, that it's really weird in a way that we still need to fight for our existence. No, I mean, and we are not kind of having a vague feeling of marginalization. No, we can really say, where is culture in the Sustainable Development Goals? It's just not there. Everyone's telling us, yeah, but you've got a role in all of them. Sort of, you are enabling all of them, so don't complain, you're there. But how are we there if we don't see us and just implicitly between the lines see our roles? Or take the State of the European Union speech of the last one of Ursula von der Leyen. Of course, culture is maybe there in the term of agriculture, but in the big political visions, we are not there, and that is weird, really. No, don't you think? And the question for me is really, what's the reason for it? Is it ignorance? Is it lack of knowledge, or is there a genuine lack of trust? If we give them money, let them prove that that there is a return on investment, which gets us in that constant justification mode where we need to give evidence and another study and yet another set of indicators to prove that we are worthy of support. But if we look at really the political level, where the political support is, then these voices are hard to hear. Maybe, I don't know, we are all, whenever it happens, we are super enthusiastic, like the Cáceres declaration of the ministers in Cáceres. We thought, oh, fantastic. Finally, there it is, political commitment, high-level political commitment. few weeks later, it's like a faraway echo. No one hears about it anymore. So looking at all the problems of the world and Europe at the moment, including the erosion of democracies and the political landscapes in Europe, where is the point that we can provide our citizens with a positive freedom, not only the negative freedom to vote, to like, to consume, but really positive freedom to take responsibility, to co-author our societies, our institutions, our provision. It is really in the cultural sector that we also contribute to a very foundational transformation of our societies. And this is something we really need to work on in the next years. We need to somehow elevate our policy discourse. That is very good. We have very trusted partners in policy making. We are in a fantastic conversation, to get back to Brian Eno, with colleagues in the European Commission, in the Parliament, in the Council. There is on that level a fantastic conversation, but where is the political vision that kind of elevates all that nitty-gritty policy making on a higher level that really would acknowledge the urgencies of our time? The report for us is very much not only a snapshot where we stand to empower ourselves to have that conversation and push for that elevation, but it also comes at a very distinct moment in time. I mean, we've just got a new European Parliament. There is a European Commission that is designated European Commission. The hearings are very soon. You may have read that we postponed our Cultural Deal EU event on the 5th of November to late January, February, because the hearings take place in November. And I think these hearings are one of these political momentums where we need to be loud and outspoken, and where we believe the report will already help us to form arguments. Some of you maybe have read the news feed that we sent yesterday with 3 questions that we want the commissioner to answer, which are political questions that we can underpin with the insights from this report. But also the Cultural Deal for Europe campaign and our Cultural Goal campaign, our 2 flagship campaigns. For these campaigns to be successful, we need to lead fundamental conversations within our sector. We get a mirror with this report to get stronger first ourselves before we go forward and advocate with the political decision makers. So this is a starting point for us. We'll embark on a journey for the next 2 years. I leave it to Natalie to take you through that journey a little bit later. And now I would really just like to jump in immediately, or not immediately, now finally jump into the main findings that Elena Polivtseva will present to us. The author of the study. I want to do a big heart, another heart, and we'll send many hearts, because not only because of the thorough, rigorous work that Elena has delivered, but for the way in which she has engaged in a conversation. I think that kind of principle of care for us is very much a conversation. And the conversation started over many lunches that we had with the team, but also with conversations during the member forum in Malmö, with many conversations you led with our members, and that conversation partner and your knowledge, rigor, critical scrutiny have delivered that. It was intended to be 15 pages, and now it's 150 report that we are so much looking forward to work with. Elena, thanks very much for your work. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Lars. And while I'm thanking you, I will start sharing my screen. I like the metaphor 15 pages becoming 150 pages, but hello, everyone. So my name is Elena. I'm a cultural policy researcher based in Brussels. I'm very happy to present, to share with you some of the insights of our new State of Culture report, which will be available to all of you to read on the website of Culture Action Europe after this event. So for us, indeed, Lars spoke a lot about the goal of it. I will just sum it up. The purpose of this project was to understand what is in general terms important for the cultural sector today in Europe, and what are the dynamics and the evolutions in the policy landscape, and how can we finally at least try to reconcile the two. On one hand, the needs and self-perception of the world of culture, and on the other hand, the dynamics in the world of politics and policy. And in order to answer these difficult questions, we have undertaken a few steps. So we have collected and reviewed documents containing cultural policy agendas, plans, and strategies of 27 members of the EU. We have also analyzed how the EU cultural policy framework has evolved in the past few years, looking at all editions of the work plan for culture and some other key documents such as legal framework of Creative Europe. We have undertaken the first edition of the State of Culture Barometer, which collected 580 responses. We interviewed representatives of 17 sectoral organizations representing different creative fields, such as museums, libraries, cultural heritage, life arts, music, etc. Also, a lot of desk research has been involved. So we analyzed the key policy papers from stakeholders, and also reviewed and included the most recent academic works and also books. And finally, we also collected existing data about the global trends to depict the context, the global context in which we are trying to figure out the state of culture. So let us start with this global context, which, to no surprise, is quite challenging. You probably heard many times these words like multi-crisis, polycrisis, meta-crisis, whatever else crisis. There are at least 6 different ways to say it. This is all to say that our world is indeed not in such a great shape. So on one hand, there is climate crisis, and scientists continue sending us warnings about the rapid degradation of our environment, and 2023 has been the warmest year on record. On the other hand, there is a real war going on in Europe with Russia's aggression against Ukraine, and the 2024 in general was the least peaceful year since 2008. It's a moment when the Global Peace Index was established. So the digital revolution, which once was seen as an opportunity and as a source of innovation, is now more and more seen as a source of disruption, especially with the development of AI. Social polarization is not just a catchy title from the media. There is data which suggests that this is a problem in all European countries. There is also stagnation of freedom of expression worldwide, and also degradation of democratic systems, and not only in other parts of the world, but also in at least 20 countries of the European Union. And finally, the famous report of Mario Draghi, which you probably all heard about, tells us that if very drastic measures such as heavy investment is not going to be put into European competitiveness, European economic competitiveness will face slow agony, and the situation, citing Mario Draghi, is very worrisome. So you see that our world is indeed in a challenging situation. So how does this affect the policy discourse and policy making? So there is definitely this feeling, the sense of being at a crossroads. If you open the website of the United Nations Pact for the Future, the first phrase you read is in big letters that our world is at a crossroads. The political guidelines of the Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is called Europe's Choice. And it is all about the necessity to be pragmatic, to be fit for the challenges, and to make choice here and now. So the policy discourse, and then also probably policy making, becomes very urgent, pragmatic, calling for swift decisions and precise calculations. Citing Jonathan White, professor from London School of Economics and Political Science, we are more and more trying to calculate and forecast the future instead of imagining it. Everything which is a bit less predictable, everything which is less tangible, is basically not being considered as important or does not deserve political trust these days. And our question for ourselves today, so how has been cultural sector doing in this kind of reality? How is the role of cultural sector, of culture, seen today? Is it being seen as an equal partner by other government agencies or portfolios or other sectors? Is it being used as a tool to solve all these problems, or neither of these? So, and here we come to our key observations of our study. The first one is not so new, it's quite familiar. There is a hyper-instrumentalization of cultural policies. which means that both national and EU cultural policy agendas extensively justify the existence of culture portfolio as such through the values of culture for various external non-cultural fields, such as diplomacy, economics, sustainability, well-being and health more recently, urban development, etc. And in the meantime, the so-called intrinsic value of culture, which, at least in my experience in the last 10 years, has only been getting negative connotation. It is not being discussed, it's not being defined, and it's definitely not being defended by cultural policies. While one might think that this would be at least one of the tasks of policy which is dedicated solely to culture. The other observation is about the gap between how policymakers value culture and how the sector itself sees its own role. It's not only about instrumentalization here, it is about a mismatch between so if culture is being promoted as a contributor or as a tool for other areas, it is also being supported and evaluated in the logic of these other external areas, be it well-being, economics, or rural development. And very often, culture does not, it doesn't really help culture to unleash its real power. So these modalities of measuring culture's impact do not work for culture, and it's basically being stripped of its own agency in this kind of reality. There is another part of this gap is about the focus. So according to our review of national cultural policies, there is a big attention from the governments to culture as a tool for economics, for international development, for cultural cohesion of societies, and also for more recently about consolidating national identities. And this is about identities inside the country, but also towards the outside world. While the cultural sector itself sees itself rather as a contributor to critical debate, as a force for transformation of societies, and as bringing people together. So, but despite this mismatch, and despite the fact that cultural sector does not really enjoy being instrumentalized, in times of crisis, precarity, and this waning political trust, cultural sector itself adopts this vocabulary and also modalities of instrumentalizing view on culture. So being constrained between, on the one hand, progressive societies which expect culture to fix all the problems of the world, and on the other hand, by the power holders, which might be a bit more conservative, cultural sector promises that it can be useful for many different causes, and how one of the scholars we cited in our report calls it out of the tactic of survival. And the crucial question is, has instrumentalization of culture been actually useful for the cultural sector? Many papers, not only ours, is giving a lot of evidence that, in fact, culture has not really been structurally put at the heart of any of the key leading policy agendas. I don't have to remind you that culture has not made it to become a goal of sustainable development, despite the more than 10 years of different campaigns. And now with the Pact of the Future, which made this dream even more blurry, at least for now. So culture is not really a central part of Green Deal or a democracy plan of the EU. It is maybe referenced here and there, but it's not really heart of policies, with all the efforts to promote it as such an important driver or a tool for all these policies. If we look at more tangible data, according to UNESCO, for example, in their report of 2022, there is evidence suggesting that the global investment in culture in the last 10 years has only dropped. At the EU level, the general average rate of investment in culture is 0.5 of GDP of member states. This level has remained stable since 2014, and in 12 countries it did not change, but in 9 countries it has decreased. And finally, the cross-sectoral collaborations, even if we discuss them a lot, there is still no full-fledged strategy of how to actually embed culture in these collaborations as an equal partner, and they are rather fragmented and imbalanced. I don't have to speak about the precarity of working conditions because this is something that is discussed a lot, but at least 10 million jobs has disappeared due to pandemic, at least in the first 2 years of it. And all the legislative activity afterwards was very important, but one of the recent reports, for instance, the one conducted by Panthea and Culture Action Europe, suggested more than 80 people still don't find their working conditions decent in the cultural sector. So it looks like that cultural sector is, of course, not the only one which is facing different shocks and changes, but the cultural sector often comes at the least prepared and the least protected in the face of all these changes that we are facing now. We speak a lot about talent drains, about reinventing ourselves, about what is our role, what should be our next instrumentalizing narrative to prove our value. That's what Lars was saying in the introduction. So we also, through our research, this is by no means new, so we try to see how does this play out at the backdrop of the very recent changes, something that came out from our interviews, for example, with sector experts. So what are those issues that we tried to bring into these reports? The first one, of course, is the artificial intelligence, which, as I said, we like to call digitalization a source of opportunity, innovation, and progress. However, what concerns AI for the moment, it is clear that risks associated with it for the cultural and creative sectors are so far bigger than the opportunities, or let's say benefits. So there are such problems as erosion of human labor, reduced opportunities, job opportunities, challenges related to transparency, intellectual property, and remuneration, governance, notion of truth and truthfulness, and many other concerns. Public perception of the implications of the AI, just like the efforts to regulate them, are lagging behind the AI revolution. So the AI Artificial Act, for example, has been quite an important step forward, and it's a pioneer law of that type in the world. However, there is still a lot of gaps, and the battle between businesses, governments, societies, creative sectors is not yet solved. But there is an opportunity in this debate, because perhaps we have to ask ourselves a question, not only as cultural workers, but also as society. We have accepted disappearance of millions of jobs in the last 100 years because of digital revolution. Are we prepared to give up on creative jobs? And if not, then what is there so unique about creative labor or creative practice, human creativity that we are want to hold on to? And maybe this debate will help us to come out of this with a different understanding of the value of culture. And while we understand that not everyone in the cultural sector is yet concerned with AI, this debate can actually help to sharpen the value of culture, the arguments for it. Another issue that came up strongly through our conversations and broader research is the autonomy of culture. There is a growing unease and concern about the interaction between culture and politics. This stems largely from the fact that many political forces which came into power in many countries in Europe see culture solely as a tool for sharpening and consolidating national identities shaped in a very singular way, something that cultural sector does not really seize its role in. There are also other political forces which, for example, see culture only as an economic tool and put it largely to the laws of the market. So this reality also on one hand, but on the other hand, there is a growing awareness about all kinds of topics of social agendas, which cultural sector is increasingly more expected to be active on, but also effective on. So on one hand, culture is being self-censored because of these impulses from the progressive part of society. On the other hand, there is also the more conservative parts. So artistic freedom is a huge topic, and it's not anymore only about direct censorship from authoritarian regimes, even if this exists as well. There are many more factors such as platformization, algorithms, culture wars, polarization of societies, self-censorship and precarity, which are happening actually all across Europe. And this topic needs to be addressed in this new shape. Another issue that we would like to bring is linked to the crisis reality that I was referring to when depicting the global context. One may think that in these dark times, let's say, or the times of urgency, we might be interested in the potential of culture to help societies to imagine a better future. However, it looks like that culture has been increasingly relegated to the interactions rather with the past. So it is a lot about exploring narratives of shared heritage and history, building bridges between the past and the present, and helping to reinforce national foundations rooted in memory. So in the EU discourse, for instance, from treaties to different program guidelines, there is this strong concept of shared cultural heritage. But when it comes to culture itself, it's rather about cultural diversity. While we think it's extremely important and shared heritage is crucial for fostering unity, there seems to be an imbalance with more focus on the shared past rather than celebrating the power of culture to shape and imagine a shared future. The next issue linked to democracy, which is maybe one of the most important ones. According to a democracy index, in 20 member states of the EU, there has been a democratic backsliding in the past few years. So this has been acknowledged at the EU level, and also culture is more and more brought up as a tool to rescue democracy. There is a study about it commissioned by the European Commission, and it is topic on the work plan for culture. So culture is supposed to be able to breach the ideological and emotional divides and bolster democracy, which sees pressures from polarization and individualization of societies. However, it's very important to remember that cultural consumption and cultural sector itself are not immune to these tendencies of individualization and polarization of societies. So on one hand, there is this platformization, which leads to a reality in which not only cultural products, but also cultural consumers are being manufactured, since they're continuously being presented with the content based on their registered preferences. They're also the culture becoming the battlefield for culture wars between different ideologies. And by the end of the day, cultural workers remain to be part of the same societies, which struggle being confined to their echo chambers and silos. So we do think that there is a proactive strategy needed. So culture will not bring us together, just like we always say, just like this, without any strategy. There is a need for shifting from access to culture concept to cultural democracy. Basically, the genuine democratic engagement shift from just the right to vote to the right to be voted. So finally, climate, of course, is a very big topic for every portfolio now of every government. And it will remain as such. Interestingly, the role of culture for climate action is not largely mentioned in current cultural policies in Europe. If climate issue is mentioned there, it's mostly about the attempt to limit culture's impact on the environment, cultural sector's impact on the environment, or to protect culture, mainly cultural heritage, from the effects of climate change. In the meantime, these goals are, of course, important, but the cultural sector believes it plays a bigger role in climate action. It is about reimagining societies and economic foundations for greater sustainability. So the cultural sector, on one hand, feels undervalued in this debate on climate, but at the same time, there is also this anxiety that this recognition can come in only a discursive way, and it will become an additional pressure for already unsustainable cultural sector. So the solution would probably be to acknowledge cultural sector and culture as a field in its own rights, to be an equal partner in sustainability, which has a right to work in its own modalities and bring its unique contribution. Here we come to the vicious circle. So there is instrumentalization of culture, which is being adopted all across policies and also in the sector, which wanes the agency of the sector, and it goes on. Very important to say that the alternative to instrumentalization of culture for us is not art for the art's sake, even if this concept has also a right to exist. For us, it is about recognizing that the cultural field has a right to be an equal partner to other sectors and to other government portfolios to drive important agendas forward. And it needs to bring its unique value, which is not defined in the terms of other sectors or other fields. But in order to become an equal partner, cultural sector needs to become stronger. And to become stronger, we believe there is a policy scaffolding needed. And here we come to our observation number 9. Policy scaffolding, this is a concept, we call it a policy autonomous area for culture, which would take care of culture in its own terms and help it to become equal agent in bigger political agendas. So this policy scaffolding has different elements. It should take care about autonomy of culture in all places and about cultural diversity and cultural democracy. It is about everyone's engagement with the arts. It's about developing a healthy cultural ecosystem. So it is recognizing that every sector and also cross-sectoral dimension have the right for equal support. And also, finally, it is about remembering that culture begins with people, with human labor that creates it, which means that people working for culture needs to be taken care of. Here, there could be 2 questions that may arise. The first question is, what does the EU actually has to do with all of this? Aren't we being told all the time that this is a national member state that should take care of change of paradigms of cultural policies. While this is all true, it is also clear that EU has a strong track record in driving innovation in different areas, be it through legal tools, but also not through legal tools. Just look at the Copyright Directive or the EU Artificial Intelligence Act, again, the pioneering law of that type in the world. So through finding initiatives, through knowledge exchange, through creative data and important research, the EU has proven that it can seed plants of innovation, and it can raise awareness about certain topics, and then as ripple effect, it creates advocacy urge at the local and national level for driving these challenges also at the national level, be this about gender equality or green agenda or anything else. So we do believe that if we need a profound rethought of paradigms of cultural policy, the EU actually has a big role to play. The ability of being ahead of the curve can have greater effects on the long term, even than legal power. And the second question that may arise, that's even more challenging, and you would say what can be more challenging, but this is about this political trust. How can the cultural sector get this political trust today? If we haven't faced it in the past few years, what can happen now that suddenly we are being trusted and being included as an equal partner, especially in the current climate? To begin with, we believe that the sector needs to restore its own trust in itself, to rebuild its self-worth and strengthen its core values. The cultural sector needs to articulate its values and its inner core, basically. We often say the value of culture in its own terms, but rarely someone can say, what are those terms? And if we don't know what these terms are, definitely other government portfolios will not know that either. So there is a need for a profound conversation and profound redefinition of these terms, unique contribution of culture or unique worth of it defined by the cultural sector itself. So, and we do think that different cultural sectors such as audiovisual or visual arts, performing arts, etc., they all currently day-to-day faced with different challenges, AI, green agenda, or anything else. And sometimes they don't even speak with the same language. But we do believe that they would advance much quicker in their day-to-day advocacy agendas if there would be a common understanding that we all have to fight for the value of culture, for the value of human creativity, for the new understanding of culture as an equal agent in different agendas. So there is a lot of work to be done, a lot of conversations to be held. And here I stop. Thank you very much. And I hope that you enjoy reading the reports. I stop sharing my screen.
Well, thank you very much, Elena. That has been really a comprehensive overview of the main findings of the report. A lot to talk, a lot to discuss. I hope that it has also triggered some questions and ideas and reflections from our audience. So let me once again invite you to use the Q&A tool on this Zoom webinar that you are supposed to find on your menu below the screen. So feel free to share some of the thoughts and ideas that might have been coming up while listening to the presentation of Elena. So thanks again, Elena, and I will take you through a little bit now to explore how we at Culture Action Europe envision working with the state of culture moving forward. So for us at Culture Action Europe, this initiative is not just a publication, but it's rather a tool that can help and will shape our future strategies, as well as hopefully foster a meaningful conversation within the sector. So it's important to mention that in the coming years, Culture Action Europe will adopt a biennial rhythm, if you like, where we will be alternating between central events and decentralized processes. So we'll have our two key moments, which will be our central Beyond conference and the State of Culture report. And those two will be happening every 2 years, and thus creating a space between them for decentralized actions with an idea to bring the discussions closer to the ground. During these interim periods, we want to embed the findings of the central action, so to speak, into the local context through our satellite Beyond editions, as well as by creating diverse dialogue spaces and exchange spaces hosted by Culture Action Europe geographical hubs. With such a decentralized approach, we want to ensure that the insights that were generated on this, so to say, top level or the central spaces are really spread across the regions and cultural communities across Europe. And this approach is very much, of course, also aligned with the core mission of Culture Action Europe, which is from one hand to listen in carefully to the realities, challenges, but also proposals that are emerging from the cultural sector, and to encode that into cultural policies and cultural policy making, but equally also to decode the way, or the other way, to decode policy developments and political shifts that will help sector to understand what is at stake and where the opportunities lie. So for us, the state of culture serves also as a monitoring and benchmarking framework. With each new edition of State of Culture report, which will happen biannually, we are building a mechanism that will allow us to keep our finger on the pulse, if you like, of the sector. It will not only serve as a report, as a status report, but also we will use it as a monitoring tool to help us measure progress, to identify and spot some trends, but also to compare changes over the time. At the same time, and most importantly, probably, the state of culture for Culture Action Europe is a starting point for deeper conversations and discussions. Hopefully thought-provoking, maybe provocative at times, but very much rooted into honest exchange, where we may agree on some aspects, but also maybe agree to disagree on others. And these conversations are specifically important now as we are entering the new policy cycle. And this is the perfect moment to start crafting together the messages that reflect the realities of the sector, but at the same time influence the political agenda. We also hope that these conversations will help us shape the new cultural narratives and help and ensure that our advocacy messages are more clear and they are more compelling and timely. So we call the state of culture primarily, we call it a mirror. It's primarily a mirror for ourselves, for our members, and for our sectors. We want to look into this mirror and to see how do we see ourselves, but also we want to show this mirror to outside world and see how the others are seeing us as a sector. So we see it also not only as a conversation starter within the sector, but also as an opportunity for policymakers or funding bodies or other sectors to listen to the conversations that were happening within the sector, and hopefully also to learn from those insights and perspectives that we generate. So what will happen next? So starting from this November, we will be launching a series of online webinars and discussions to delve in really deeper into the key topics raised by the State of Culture report, to provide more space for dialogue and for reflection and exchange. So those online webinars will last for 7 months, starting from now, and will culminate in our flagship event Beyond 2025, which will take place from the 4th to the 7th of June in Turin, Italy. We want to curate this immersive conference experience that will be also shaped by the findings of the state of culture to ensure that the issues that are important for our community are taking center stage. Also, in addition to that, during the Beyond 2025, Culture Action Europe members specifically will also have a unique opportunity to propose specific topics they believe that we should be exploring in the next editions of the State of Culture. And these discussions will happen in the framework also of Beyond and specifically at the Members Forum that is only open for Culture Action Europe members. And as usual, you know, the members' input is very vital for us, and it plays a core role in framing and in shaping our priorities as a network. So ultimately, the State of Culture report is not just Culture Action Europe's project, but it belongs to all of us. Having said that, we encourage you to engage and participate in online and offline discussions that will follow and take an active role in shaping the narratives and policies that will define the future of culture in Europe. I hope you had the time to mark your agendas with these upcoming dates and the upcoming online webinars, as well as the Beyond 2025. But of course, they will be made available also on Culture Action Europe website. And we really do hope that you can join us in this experiment. So I think, having said that, I'm supposed to give it over to Ines, who has been following our questions and answers section of the webinar. So Ines, what are some of the key points and questions that are coming through?
So, well, first of all, congratulations on the work. I was really moved between my travels and stops with the role, the dynamics that the webinar was having. And I was thinking about everything that happens from the first moment that we talked about this report and the final product. And I'm very, very proud of the effort, and also about the candor of the results, and the way that even in these questions that we have in the Q&A, they are already making our participants, our guests, thinking. We have several questions, and I've been answering some, as you can see, and the others I keep thinking about the power of networks, because, for example, Omar, he's telling us that he feels that many times the mid and small scale companies and organizations, they work as an ecosystem, but he feels that there's a huge distance towards the big institutions and the freelancers, of course. But I really feel that we can do it if we work together. And working together in our case is about connections and discussing ideas such as these. What do you think, Elena?
I think that this question is very good. I read it also in the chat, and I thought that this is indeed a very important point. This report, this appeal, let's say, or this challenge represented for the sector to work together and to start this conversation to define the role of culture and to define it in its own terms. I do have a hope that if this conversation really happens, and if institutions really understand that they don't like anymore this position they have to be constrained between precarity, self-censorship, or censorship and influence of any of the authoritarianism that is coming up, if they really understand that they lack the value of culture in society, I think they will naturally turn to speak to artists and to embed their voices into this conversation. So yeah, there is, of course, a lot of nuance into that. So there is a lot of struggle and a lot of these power dynamics that are going on, which also reflect the power dynamics happening in societies. But I don't think that if institutions really genuinely want to solve it, and they don't include artists or freelancers, and they continue treating them in an unfair way, I don't think this conversation will lead them any further than where they are already currently. Ines, you're...
Yes, sorry. I was reading, you're right, it's about that. And that also links with the threat to cultural autonomy, right? And freedom. So how do we link with that? Because of the instrumentalization We are constantly linking it to the threat to cultural autonomy and the freedom of the artistic freedom. And so how do we, what are the ways that we can work together to empower ourselves as a sector? It's basically the transversal approach of the questions.
For that, there is this fantastic book written by Fatos Ustek, which is called The Art Institution of Tomorrow. And she speaks precisely about that in order to break through this sad reality that many cultural institutions find themselves currently, in this kind of constrained reality and this push to address different topics without genuine connection to these topics, or this fear to lose their visibility because of doing something wrong or not pleasing any part of the political spectrum. So there is a need to turn back to artists as a community and to use that knowledge, because in that community, there is less of this, adjustment to these political frames. So even if, so to cut it short, I think if there is this genuine realization of the state of culture or the state of cultural institutions, I think the answer would be found in going to artists, because this is a source of the art in its own terms. It's not the institutions that are going to define it solely.
Okay. So I'm managing the questions, so I'm managing two realities at the same time. Please bear with me. But I think that what I feel from the questions that are being asked and from the dynamics and even your answers now, Elena, is that we have a lot of things to discuss. And I hope that everybody that's on board will continue this conversation the next months. And I really, even from our contacts with the European policy officers and everything, I think everybody's very open to learn more from each other. And even in the research, you recognize the role that the Commission has sometimes in creating small cycles of innovation or prioritizing certain policy measures. And I think that we should really open the door to a continuous conversation between everybody and reinforce the ecosystem as such. But we have to start by not only empowering ourselves from the point of view of the intrinsic value of culture, but we also have to believe in ourselves as a sector. And we also have to feel that we, I would say we have to abandon the imposter syndrome, because usually what I feel is that the artistic and cultural professionals always feel like the weak link or the stranger in the room. And the fact is, we are the people that bring imagination and creativity and the capacity of sometimes talking about very difficult subjects into the rooms. And that's a very powerful tool in all the diversity that we have. So I think I'm going to wrap it up. We'll keep the questions in the recording and maybe we'll continue this conversation next sessions. Elena, as a board member and a KAI member and the president, I really congratulate you on this work. It has been a fantastic journey, and I'm really looking forward as it will intertwine with our strategy in the next 2 years. And as you see from this discussion, maybe it was news from many of you, we are also moving for a next level of connection through the KAI strategy with this work into boards in the more centralized version with the big events, but also in smaller events where people can connect and discuss and exchange important and maybe dangerous ideas. Lars, you want to just close it up? Thank you so much, everybody.
No, Ines, that was the dangerous ideas was the thought that should close that. Thanks to everyone and see you very soon for the conversations. I'm looking forward. Thanks, Elena. Thanks, Natalie, Ines, Lucrezia, Vasiliki in the background, the whole team, all the board, and our wonderful members. Take care.